and maybe there is no degree, maybe neither is worse than the other, but from my perspective, abortion is worse than slavery.
Is abortion worse than slavery? You heard what Jason Whitlock has to say. And it's so funny that I'm playing two videos recently of Jason Whitlock. But his argument is an argument that I've heard recently from a lot of people on the conservative side. Now, full disclosure, as a biblical conservative, there is no moral equivalency to slavery or abortion. They're both wrong. They're both demonic. They both come from the fall of man, from the darkened hearts of men, wanting to enslave and control and dominate another human being from the outward perspective, and then a woman who wants to be selfish and control her life and terminate her pregnancy. They're both wrong. But conservatives, for some reason, feel the need to either minimize or deflect from slavery, as if they don't want to admit the ills of slavery because it will take away from the conservative message. And I've always told people, first of all, for some reason, when people think of slavery, they only think of the chattel slavery here in America. Slavery has happened and has been in place pretty much since the dawn of mankind. I mean, I can look at Genesis, where Joseph was sold into slavery. That's the first example in the Bible of slavery. And slavery was an institution that's been around a long, long time, and it still exists today in the world, in parts of Africa, in China, with the Uyghurs. So slavery has been and will continue to go on, because when you live in a fallen world, you're gonna have men that want to dominate other men. Instead of taking that command from the Lord to dominate the kingdom of darkness, to dominate the earth and subdue it, men want to dominate each other. So you're going to have slavery. And then abortion. You had abortion. Go look at Exodus chapter 1, where the Egyptians were wanting to kill the Hebrew babies, the Hebrew boys. So you had abortion right then and there. You had infanticide. Same thing. That was infanticide. But it's the precursor to abortion. So people would say, oh, that's not different. That's infanticide. Infanticide, abortion. It's still terminating a child. Okay? It's killing a child. It's the same thing. But conservatives, for some reason, some conservatives, not all conservatives, because I hate when people paint with a broad brush, but some conservatives feel guilty about slavery as if they committed it. No, you didn't commit it. And don't let them use that as a cudgel to beat you upside your head with it. I don't know if my ancestors were part of slavery or not, but that doesn't mean that I have to go back and penalize people that had ancestors who owned. Matter of fact, some of my ancestors might have owned slaves. Black people owned slaves, okay? So, but that's beside the point. Conservatives minimize themselves and paint themselves into a box when they try to deflect from the ills of slavery and say things like Jason Whitlock just said.
And maybe there is no degree, maybe neither is worse than the other, but from my perspective, abortion is worse than slavery. And I say that because we have this mentality.
Well, that's an easy one.
The founding fathers were the worst people in the world, and oh my God, they had slavery. And I'm like, well, hold on, man. We got abortion basically on demand. And we got people out in the streets having convulsions. I can't kill my baby whenever I want to. And I'm like, man, I can't wait for God to make a ruling on this. They're like, no, I think this abortion thing's worse than slavery. Am I wrong for thinking that?
You know, my ancestors were slaves, but I'm here. If my mother had an abortion, I wouldn't be. So yeah, you get no argument from me on that one.
And I'm glad he had Pastor VODDIE on there. And Pastor VODDIE is a voice of reason, and I respect that man tremendously. And to a point, I agree. Abortion snuffs out the life of an individual. It does. But let's not make that moral leap to say that it's worse than slavery, okay? They're both wrong in the eyes of God. That's the same argument people make when it comes to different sins. Oh, your sin is worse than mine. No, all sin is worse. All sin is bad. All sin is horrible. All sin is an abomination in the eyes of God, okay? Let's stop trying to rank them. This one is worse than that. No, they're all wrong. So as a conservative, we have to stop linking abortion to slavery.
Abortion is worse than slavery.
This is all you. So single camera. Go.
People thought, I think people think that I was just saying this to be explosive, that I was just trying to get a rise, trying to be edgy, or what's the word? I don't know.
Provocative.
Trying to be provocative. Thank you. People thought I was just trying to be provocative, but I mean this, and I'm going to unpack what I mean by this. So first of all, a very common question is, why do you feel the need to compare the two? Mm-hmm. They're both injustices. I feel the need to compare the two because our society is completely desensitized to what abortion is.
Yeah.
And our generation, especially in Gen Z, has no idea how atrocious abortion is and what a human rights issue it is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually really useful to say that abortion is worse than slavery because it really forces people to think. Because what's the worst human rights issue that everybody talks about? Slavery. And yes, of course, it was heinous, it was wrong, it was immoral, it was disgusting. We all know that. But once you put slavery and abortion in the same sentence, it really forces you to understand the true atrocities of abortion. I've said this many times.
Yeah.
It is the number one human rights issue that is going on in our country right now.
There was a guy who commented on that post on TikTok when I put that meme up, and a lot of people were going nuts. I forget who he responded to, but I think it was some girl that was like, as a black woman, this is horrible. I can't believe you would say something like this. And this one guy responded, and he said, 60 million plus kids have been murdered since 1973 or have, been aborted since 1973. It's not a stretch to say that abortion is worse than slavery.
It is.
And I was like, wow, this guy's probably thinking about it critically.
Yeah. First, before I go into my argument, that response of girls, I'm black. I can't believe you're saying that. I'm getting tons of comments about that. This is how dumb people are. People really think that
only black people have been enslaved.
That only black people
throughout history.
Guys.
Hold on.
Literally, probably the majority of human beings on Earth today, their ancestors owned slaves.
Right.
And you heard what that lady had to say. Same type of deal. Abortion is worse than slavery. You're defeating the purpose of speaking to the ills of abortion when you make it the moral equivalent of slavery. They're both wrong, okay? They are both wrong. But you have to speak to abortion and the ills of abortion. For example, when it comes to the black community, right? When Roe v. Wade was passed back in 1973, we had about almost 50 years of that, right? Did you know about 20 million babies, black babies, were aborted as a part of Roe v. Wade? Did you know that? And did you know, for example, a lot of people don't know these statistics because they don't talk about these anymore. But did you know, for example, black women account the most when it comes to abortions, but black people only make about 13% of the population? Did you know that? Speaking of slavery and speaking of abortion and the impacts of it on the black community, let's get down to the root of the problem. That's why I wish conservatives would get down to the root of the problem. You have to be truthful with people. Speak the truth. Just because that issue is touchy, just because that issue may cause a disagreement and a conflict, doesn't mean we can't talk about it from a biblical standpoint that they're both wrong. That abortion now is the leading killer of black people in America. It is. More than crime, more than drugs, more than accidents, abortion. So we do need to talk about it, but don't talk about it in the same breath as slavery. Leave slavery where it was. Slavery was horrible. Abortion is horrible. They're both demonic. Conservatives, please, biblical conservatives, we have to speak the truth in love. We speak the truth to both angles. We speak the truth when it comes to the history of slavery, chattel slavery, how it was wrong, how people used the Bible to justify slavery. That was wrong, and we admit that was wrong. And at the same time, we'll call out the ills of abortion, how terminating a pregnancy, all for the sake of convenience and pleasure, is wrong. And you know who else I blame for abortions that really don't get the blame like they should? Men. These weak men who have allowed themselves, who exchanged their seed for pleasure. Yeah, they exchanged the life of their seed. That is their seed that these women are terminating. They exchange the life of their seed for a temporary pleasure. They don't want to take on the responsibility of being a father. They don't want to take on the responsibility of shepherding that child that was going to be brought into the world. So they wanted that moment of pleasure. And I blame the women just as equally, because the woman didn't have to lie down and allow that man to impregnate them. But they're both wrong. But men seem to skate free when it comes to abortion. And that's not true. And I think men need to take just as much responsibility as the women when it comes to abortion. Because at the end of the day, abortion and slavery is all to make people victims. Slavery made the people that were oppressed victims. Abortion makes the baby a victim. We are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. Life is important. Liberty is important. They're the same. Life. You need life. If you don't have life, you can't have liberty. Yet at the same time, you want liberty as well. Declaration of Independence says all men have been endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, chiefly among them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's do that. Let's give people life. Let's give them liberty and allow them to pursue happiness. Let's do that without castigating them and without feeling sorry for things that we have no responsibility for.